Welcome back to the SciPod heads. I'm your host, Jack Langworthy, and today on the show we have somebody that he's got a lot of fanboys. He's the founder of D42, an executive at Looker, and now he's got his new startup, the Gravity Foundation. Lucas Thelosen, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me here today, Jack.
It's a pleasure to meet you, and I'd love to sort of start at the beginning of your journey. What drew you to data analytics in the first place?
Oh man, yeah, I don't know how far back we want to go there. Let's see.
When were you born? What day of the week?
No, so I'm from a tiny town in Germany, a rural town, grew up without a TV or anything, just like a bunch of cows and tulip fields and windmills, like right on the Dutch border. And I don't know, I guess I was always interested in just data and statistics. And I always liked how numbers don't really lie, right? How like people have opinions and thoughts and whatnot. But, if we look at the numbers, we can usually have a ground truth. And, it really, like I have a really strong sense of justice and what's right and wrong, right? And with that, like, hey, let's look at the numbers, right? Like look at economics, or like I got really interested in interest rates early on for whatever reason. Like, as an 8-year-old, I had for some reason a passion for interest rates.
Wow.
I built up a little scheme in my primary school of like lending money out. Yeah, I was a loan shark before I turned 10. Yeah.
Curious, like who did you read? Authors that brought you there?
Yeah, I got really interested in the Fuggers, which is a German family back from the 1700s, I think, or 1600s, that funded a lot of the Holy Roman Empire, and they lended to everybody in Germany back in the days. And there was I think at that point I was about 9 or 10. There was a little video game too you could play where you can build your own little empire of trading partners, and I really got into it.
Yeah, I think it was Napoleon who said something about compound interest. The power of compound interest can just destroy nations. There's some quote about that.
I was really into it, and I actually wanted to get a T-shirt that said I heart compound interest, and I was 9, and my mom was like, "It's not going to help at all. It's not going to help." Yeah,
sounds like a good mother. Looking out for you.
I was tiny too, so when you're 9 years old and a tiny boy, you got to be a little more careful than wearing a T-shirt that says "I heart compound interest." Yeah.
I had a similar appreciation for data where I studied the classics in college. So you read all of Western canon, right? And that's what attracted me to it. But I also had to do 4 years of math. I was like, oh, I hate math. I like philosophy. But by the end, I was so tired about reading what is what, and just getting to the things that work, right? Looking at the number system, the beauty of Euclid was a big part of it. And so in the end, I was much better at math than philosophy. A little bit about myself there. And that's why I was curious who you read. If were there any other economists?
Oh yeah, no. Later on, I mean, we were at I got my school. Luckily, it was a small rural school, but they did offer philosophy as a minor to take. So I minored in philosophy in high school, and we got to read all of pretty much everybody. My parents tried to sneak in Karl Marx because they're like, he's turning hardcore capitalist here. I was doing options trading at 14. I really got into that. Yeah. And as soon as we had internet, I made my dad set up an online trading account for me. So they gave me Karl Marx for Christmas when I was 14. I was like, that is not how you turn someone around. It's not going to work.
That's great.
But it's interesting there's a lot of interesting economists that actually are very close to philosophy, and so I think there's a strong relationship between okay, let's figure out how the world works through numbers, but also what makes people through psychology and philosophy. I think there's a strong connection there.
Yeah, me too. And so now you're happily married to, you stole one of our women. Daniel and I are from Colorado, and you stole one of our tribesmen, a Coloradoan. When did you come to America and start setting up DOS 42?
Yeah, so when I can give you just my 30 seconds or maybe 60 seconds, let's see how quickly I can do it. So I switched from physics. I studied physics first, and then I switched to economics. And when I did that, I had to learn English. So before that, I thought, I'm dyslexic, so I didn't learn any languages really. And so I had to learn English really quick. I had it just verbally in high school. So I got an exchange. I did an exchange program. Got to Nebraska actually, like a tiny town in Nebraska, where I didn't have to take any test of English as a foreign language tests, and I met my wife, and that's a very good way to learn English.
Oh. Yeah,
Yeah. So
that's great.
yeah, we got to know each other. We briefly worked in Bogota in Colombia. She was in social justice. I was in microfinance, and then we settled in Boulder, Colorado. And one of the things I loved about the US and made me really want to stay was this, like, people asking, what do you want to do? What are your hopes and dreams? What do you want to achieve? And people get pretty excited about, like, when you want to try something new. They're like, okay, that's a little crazy, but you go for it. That's like the mentality that I get here. And you go back to Germany and it's very different. People, and it's a bit frustrating because I think they try to mean it in a well-meaning way of, like, all the things that could go wrong. So they tell you 100 things that probably are going to go wrong when you do this. And so there's a strong hesitation, I think, in general, to do something independent, like start your own business. But here, I was a data analyst for 10 years. I set up data analytics, across companies for 4 different companies. I built my first AI in 2010. And then I started, I found out about Looker. And this was like 2013. DBT, like DBT wasn't DBT yet, like Snowflake wasn't, just starting. You had all these companies emerging, and I thought this would be a really interesting thing to advise companies on. So I started a consulting firm, and it became really successful. I got to advise Uber and Amazon and like a bunch of large companies across the US and internationally, actually. And yeah, really quickly, I got a great offer. I joined Looker as an executive there and ran the consulting practice and built that out to 120 people before the acquisition by Google. And then I was at Google for 4 years. Most recently ran the product group for data and AI. So bringing the data and AI business together. But there's just so much opportunity right now that I felt like, when you're in the ocean and you're surfing and you see the waves, right? And you have to make a decision on riding a wave. I was on a really good wave, but I saw an even better wave coming, and I felt like I had to swim back out there and hop on this new wave, because you only get that many great waves in your lifetime, right? I got this amazing wave before in 2013, 2014 with Looker and these new databases popping up. And this is another one. This is a real wave coming. And I wanted to be on it. I want to ride it, and so I had to quit and start my next company.
Let's get into that. I have 2 questions that I want to ask though first. This new wave, you call it the AI wave. I want to know what you built in 2010, your first AI. What did you build, and what's changed in 14 years?
Yeah. So, well, we have had multiple hype cycles of AI over the years. A lot of people probably didn't quite know about the previous hype cycles because they were much smaller than this one. But there were previous AI hype cycles. 2010, there definitely was an AI hype cycle. And in this case, right, like all AI really did, this was what I built was human supervised learning. So it was not neural networks at all. But in essence, I was at a startup. We were modifying mortgages. So this was a financial crisis. People were defaulting on their loans, and banks had to foreclose on their houses. So the thesis was, the government published a bunch of new regulation that allowed us to modify mortgages so people can stay in their house. But there were hundreds of thousands of them, all happening at once. People were 6 months late on payment. They were about to be foreclosed on their house. So the banks had to act really, really quickly, but stay within the regulations that the government provided. So what I did is, in essence, I wrote down all the different regulations, all the different scenarios that would allow someone to qualify for, let's say, 2 years, no payments, or 5 years, 1% payment, or something like that. And we wrote down all the scenarios, and now we just had to get the data of who this person is. So we bought a text recognition tool, an OCR tool, And we scanned in the paperwork, it read the previous agreements, and that fed into my algorithm that then published what this person, or it decided what this person would qualify for. And at its peak, I think we ran 400,000 mortgages per month through it. So we ended up modifying a huge chunk of the US housing market through that. A human underwriter had to sign off on it. If the human underwriter disagreed, they went back into the algorithm to modify the algorithm. That was the first AI. Now you call it an AI.
Yeah, that makes sense. Basically, doing the task of reading. Well, it's more complicated than that, I guess. And so what's this new wave that differentiates it from the previous one, and why the Gravity Foundation, basically? What just made you be like, I'm a Google executive, screw it, I'm going again. I want to get back in the water.
Yeah, and there aren't that many. I think there's a very small group of, Google is a great place to work, and so it's definitely a hard place to leave. So there was another hype cycle of AI, I think probably around 2017. I have to look up when it was, but this one was more around statistics, like predictions, pattern detection, and predicting out what's next. And in essence, that's pretty much what generative AI is in some sense too, right? Predicting what's next, but this time applying it to text. You had previously a decent breakthrough in images. So if you use Google Photo for a while, for example, being able to remove people in the background and the AI filling in what the background probably looks like, but that's predicting what's next, predicting what the color, what the pixels probably are going to be. The same happened in text, right? Where we took a Wikipedia article, we removed every third word, figure out what the third word should be. Okay. Once you got that, you remove every second paragraph and it can predict what the paragraph should be. And then you go and you have generative AI, which actually is just predicting out what probably the next couple of words should be. But, okay, I know I'm doing a quick lecture on what generative AI is. What makes it so exciting is that in data analytics, we always had this last gap of talking in the language of the person we're dealing with. Like the business user, right? Let's say the chief revenue officer, the head of sales. That person likes to see things in a certain way and speaks a certain language. And I don't mean German or English, but they talk in a certain language that is the head of sales talks. Well, the head of data talks in a very different language. The head of data loves giant spreadsheets with hundreds of columns and 1,000 rows. And that disconnect, I got to see this over and over running the consulting practice for Google. It's really hard to bridge. You need a lot of very highly paid, qualified people to actually explain the insights to the business and then take the response from the business back to the data team. And I think that generative AI can bridge that gap, can help with bridging that gap and actually translate data into the language the different business units speak. So we are able to not only take the previous iterations of AI, predictive algorithms that allow us to take, okay, we have gaps in the data, we don't know what the future will look like, but we can actually predict out what the future would look like based, using the models we have. We can use that, and we can use the generative AI component, which then allows us to speak the language of the business and actually explain, okay, this is what we're seeing in the data, and these are the actions you might want to take, and then take what the business is saying and bring it back into the data to enrich the analysis further.
That was a great tutorial in generative AI, and I'm just pausing because it's almost it's sublime, scary big what you're talking about here, to where, because I've seen this is, everybody knows executives and the data team don't speak the same language, right? The nerds hosting the data lakes and then putting it into the graphs and all this stuff. And then an executive just needs clarity on these things. And they might not have said specifically to the data team what to look up. And it might be drilling down into that information, and it gets lost along the way. So, I actually just want to hear a bit more about how this can be used. What would be a good example? Maybe Uber, IKEA. What's a company that could really make the most out of Gravity Foundation?
That's a very, very good question. We're dealing with a variety of different customers right now that are very interested in using Orion. The biggest use case that immediately popped up, because I think they have the biggest need, are companies that are using data to report back to their constituents. So let's say you have an advertising network. Google might be too big, but like let's say you have a platform where you can advertise. You need to report back, right? How are your ads doing? Or let's say you are a grocery store, right? You have to report back to your vendors and how good certain goods are doing, how, what some of the challenges might be. And in the example, okay, let's maybe stick with the grocery store. In the example of a grocery store, you might have 100 stores, and 100 stores have different performances, and they sell, General Mills like Cheerios and whatnot at different rates in different stores. So you have a variety of different data to report back to General Mills, Johnson & Johnson, and whatnot. And that would require a ton of analysts to now go in and find the insights. One of the companies we're working with right now, weather is an important factor on how their product is being sold. And so Orion is an agentic system. And let me maybe pause on agentic system for a moment here. So what we do is we take all these different LLMs and they actually talk with each other. So we create different personas. Imagine a room of 7 consultants where each one has a different role to play. And that's Orion. Orion is the room. And in there you have Gemini talking to GPT, talking to Llama, talking to Claude. And they're saying, hey, look, over here, I see that, in Colorado right now, blueberries are selling much faster. And another Orion agent, maybe Gemini powered, says, well, I just checked the weather and it has been getting unusually warm in Colorado, which is usually associated with higher blueberry sales. And then another Orion agent might be looking at search trends, and it sees that there's more activity around recipes with blueberries. And it can then triangulate and say, okay, I have your own data. I just went into your Looker instance or whichever BI tool you use. And I can see that they're, bringing all these different data sources together, that there's actually, probably a higher chance of blueberry sales in this given zip code. Now, this level of analysis, right, you could do if you had 80 hours of uninterrupted time. But who has that, right? Not like every single grocery store of this given, example wouldn't have the time to do that. Orion can do that in 15 seconds, right? It can argue through it. And then we have an agent that is super suspicious the whole time. And there's like, well, how did you come up with this? Walk me through your reasoning. So we really get rid of all kinds of hallucinations or like anything that's not based in real data. Yeah, and then you get an insight that comes out and it says, you know what, blueberry producer X, Y, and Z over here in this zip code, you might want to ship more fresh blueberries because we see a spike in demand in the next week.
Okay, I want to push back a little bit. I was just talking to my beloved Uncle Hal, who's a lawyer in Los Angeles. He's run his firm, upstanding guy for, he's 75 now, for a long time. And what he does is he'll take his firm and they'll ask ChatGPT a legal question and like something specific to California law that, they know, right? And it will generate a reply with perfect grammar that is totally incorrect, right? So to me, that's just like such a funny classic example of the problem with ChatGPT. I've similarly been trying to I'm very big into agriculture. What do you earn per acre with vanilla? And it'll give me a breakdown that looks like a good business plan, but it's something like $1 million per acre, which is bogus, right? So with Orion, it sounds to me like the ChatGPT lunatical wrong positions would be countered against by conversations with the other AIs. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly. So I think one of the things we have to understand about a large language model is it will always respond, right? It is trained to always respond. And so we have to have checks and balances in place. This is like what in the early days when the LLMs were just becoming popular, I compared it to an overly eager intern on 2 giant cups of coffee. Right. So this intern will tell you whatever crosses their mind, right? Because they're just so excited to be there. Yeah. And so you want to have a little bit of a checks and balance there. It's like, okay, whatever, Jake, you're super excited to be here. And thank you so much for telling me, this very wordy, very exciting thing. But where did your sources come from? Walk me through your reasoning. And so having an LLM in there its only job is to be suspicious and asking, what's your reasoning? Walk me through it again. And we actually go through the same analysis about 3 times. So we make sure that, the results are consistent. If you have a tool that is 90% correct and you ask it 3 times, right, the chances that the results, if they are the same each time, the chances that they're correct are very high. We also use multiple guardrails in there. So for example, our LLM will never do any math on its own. It always uses purpose-built tools for that. We use right now heavily Looker, right? So that there's a data modeling in there. So there's a ground truth in that as well. So multiple checks and balances to make sure there's nothing made up, because the tool is built to always provide a response.
It's funny, you've kind of anthropomorphized these AIs, which in my head, I don't think by intention, but they're like, well, it's almost like each one is its own character, its own role to play in the business, it sounds like. And are you training each one like more in depth, like you did with the predictive modeling, but this one specifically needs to be doubtful, and this one really needs to double check the research? Could you explain a little bit more on how you train the Orion team?
Yeah. So we're actually coming back to how to manage a team. We're really mindfully staying away from calling it he or she, or it doesn't have names. We have an agent that is suspicious. We have an agent that's excited. We have a data science agent. We have a Looker specialist. We have a third-party data specialist, right? And those are their names. It's not, he or she, it's it. That said, right? Yeah, that said, they're trained on human data, right? They're trained on language, which is a very human thing. And they exhibit very human psychology traits. So when you think about assembling a team, you do think of it almost like managing a team of people, right? So we actually, one is now a manager, one of the agents. So not because that agent asked for a salary increase or anything, but that, we needed someone to be a tiebreaker. So when there is 2 agents with strong opinions, we have an agent that actually has authority to say, okay, we're going left or right. So that's why we have a managing agent.
So this is going to change a lot in the workforce, the world. I'm not really a Luddite. Some people think, and I understand the fear. I mean, what you're describing should have many dev teams and executives even concerned about their jobs. But I also think accountants were probably afraid when Excel came out. Somehow the consulting industry grew even bigger, or the finance industry. How do you see this transforming the workforce?
Yeah, it's a tool, right? It's another tool at your disposal. And the way I see it is, in my experience running the consulting arm, Amazon was able to pay us a ton of money. Uber was able to pay us a ton of money. Walmart was able to pay us a lot of money, right? So I fly out to Arkansas and I advise them and charge them a lot of money to get them insights that really change their business and help them save money and make more profit. But I want to get that capability of, really smart consultants coming in and taking a look to the average business. And I think that is super exciting to me, right? Instead of Walmart paying millions of dollars to this consulting group of Googlers that are coming in and looking at things, can we just charge, a very, very reasonable fee to come in and help, the blueberry producers of America? Can we help a local grocery store chain, right? Companies that previously were not able to afford these top-notch consultants. And I think that's what I'm seeing over and over. So yes, we are now able to level up the analytical capabilities of a Walmart with the analytical capabilities of a local grocery store. And in my mind, that is a very exciting time. That is not necessarily there's always going to be data analysts who actually are doing stakeholder management, right? But you don't have the time to spend 80 hours doing a in-depth analysis across, all 100 stores that you have.
Yeah, it's democratizing consultancies, I suppose. In a way, it would make a DAS 42 or a Silver Creek Insights, it would make them change, it seems to me. Not become irrelevant, but now the thing that's required of a client for a client has changed a little bit? Or would this blow DOS 42 out of the water forever? Would that be? Are you trying to?
I mean, look, I know this is being recorded and probably broadcasted, and whatnot, but like, I think there's always going to be work for getting the data ready, getting the data into a state that is actually consumable by an AI. I think there is, like, I was never super excited about the consulting firms that come in and just create 120 slides for you.
Oh yeah.
I think what makes, and I think we all know which consulting firms I'm talking about here, right? Yeah. What I rather have, like what I want to sell with Orion and Gravity Foundation is your team of 7 top-notch consultants that are in the room at 3 a.m. going through your data and letting you know, for your head of sales, head of marketing, head of procurement and supply chain, like, hey, these are the most important things you should pay attention to today. I'm not building you a 3-year strategy roadmap of strategic partnerships to like words that, you look at this 120 slide deck strategy consulting engagement, right? Like, I want to be can we create a daily coach to your business that is there and does incremental changes every given day, every given week, every given month, and is there side by side with your team?
Do you see, like, if I'm say it's at IKEA and I'm, I don't know, a country manager for Germany, would I be working with Orion as a piece of software? Would it be conversational? How do you see the interface changing so that, like, truly is a partner for a country manager who's trying to get a handle on all the Billy book cases, and it's a big, complicated, many stores. What's it like for the customer?
A lot of the BI tools right now are focused on what they call conversational analytics. And so they create a chat interface where you can type in a question and you get a response back. So, what was revenue last week? And it gets you back, $12,000. Orion is different because Orion actually works on its own at 3 a.m., 4 a.m., whenever you want it to run. And you tell it, much like a data analytics team, it's like, hey, these pieces of analytics is something we should be doing. And we actually pre-populate it for you because, we know your retail company or your supply chain company, whatever you are, but we can actually pre-populate some plans for you. But in essence, we go through, these are things that you should do on an ongoing basis. Maybe you should do it weekly. Maybe you should check on it monthly. What is the safety stock margin for your inventory by location? For, in the IKEA example, we should probably check on that once a month. And maybe we should reset and slightly adjust it. Maybe it should be 6% instead of 5%. And so that is something an analyst should do on an ongoing basis. And that's what Orion would do for you. It also would do root cause analysis and like more ad hoc analysis for you. But you would say, every morning I want you to take a look and tell me what happened yesterday and what I should pay attention to today. And you just tell it that, and you say, I want you to do that at 3 a.m. and send me an email, send me a PDF afterwards, send me a Slack message or text message, whatever it should be. And then it sends it to you whenever you want it to get. Instead of waiting for a business person to ask a question, we actually perform an in-depth analysis of what are the questions the business should be asking. And we run it asynchronously. So we run it at night, in the morning, over the weekend.
So I want to keep going with this. How do you see it transforming, maybe not just the workforce, but the world with AI at this level? I mean, what you just described is like any company can have their own in-house McKinsey or Deloitte. There's something better, but what's the impact? What happens after that?
Yeah, so here's the thing, right? Like, having run consulting businesses before, like, they always sell another statement of work. And here you have a tool that doesn't care if it gets promoted. It doesn't care for the next statement of work. It really just wants to recommend the best action you can take today. No second agenda. And that is quite unique. That is special. And I'm really excited about it. It's great. Like, when you watch the demo, you can see the ROI numbers just going up and up, right? It's super exciting. But it gets it to the average business, right? Like, can we get this to the, like, very middle America or Europe or whichever country, right? Like, this is not exclusive anymore to the top 5% of companies in the United States. As like a previous, you just mentioned McKinsey or Deloitte, right? You had to pay a lot of money. You had to pay a lot of layers in that company until you finally get to that analyst that actually comes in, and that analyst has the motivation to sell additional statement of work. Like you don't have that anymore with Orion, which is super exciting. We can now bring a very sophisticated knowledge worker into your business with no second agenda.
Middle America, Europe, but also like emerging markets as well. As I mentioned, I'm based in Africa, and in Tanzania, there's a lot of inefficiency in getting food around this region, in tracking the logistics. And I mean, I've talked to executives in this space who are running, getting the food to many people. And it's just clicking with me as you're saying this. They have to report back to each of those vendors and those challenges, and just the fact that it's nowhere near as efficient as in the US. But it sounds like Gravity Foundation is going to be able to give Walmart level logistics to places that are where they really suffer due to poor logistics, where food insecurity is a way of life. So like I could really see like improved prosperity really being an impact of AIs being embedded in companies globally.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, that gets me so excited about this wave, right? I'm actually excited for the hype to kind of die down, because I do think, this will give an average business, an amazing lawyer, an amazing accountant, an amazing marketeer, an amazing data analyst, right? And that is something that previously was only possible if you had a large company. So I have 4 daughters, and I was just like, guys, you can just start your own business. Like, you can be an entrepreneur and own your own business and have all these amazing knowledge workers at your fingertip that was previously not possible, right? Like, you couldn't run a local coffee shop having a great lawyer, a great accountant, all these different things. Those would cost you a lot of money, which would make it really hard to be a small business owner.
Yeah, tell me about it. That's how do you want your daughters to go to college, or do you want them to just be little entrepreneurs?
Well, look, I mean, this is a classic, right, Silicon Valley question. I mean, I do, there's an experience there with college, and like you mature and become an adult, and like all these different things that really, are valuable for college. But at the same time, right, it's a lot of money. And if I take, let's say $150,000, which it would probably cost me here in the US, right, you can start a business. That's a great loan
Yeah.
to start a business. So I don't know if I want to get into a college or business kind of conversation, but I do think there's a tremendous opportunity to create a business now from the ground up, learn a lot by doing. Um, I'm not saying you should not do college. Instead, maybe do both if you can afford it. But if you can't afford it, right, I don't think you're necessarily at a huge disadvantage by just starting your thing, or maybe work at a company first to get an understanding and then start your own business. I do think it brings business ownership at the fingertip of a lot more people. Like this new generative AI movement, this ability to, have an accountant, have a lawyer, have a great data analyst at your fingertip. I mean, one of the challenges I still see, right, and back to your point of what are the good old consultants going to do, data needs to be there, right? Like there's a huge advantage being a newer company right now, because you're probably collecting data from the get-go. If you have not been collecting data, there's very little the AI can actually do for you that is not boilerplate. So the more you have your own data, the more it can customize things to your specific needs. So I think, catalog, like owning your own data, having your own data accessible is still very important.
There's so many businesses in Africa I want to introduce you to. I think Gravity Foundation needs to be talking to the NGOs like the World Food Program and USAID, but also like the logistics companies. And then when it comes to, I've got a little boy and a little girl. They're 2 and 4, and the education thing is a thorn in my side right now. It's so expensive to send them to a private school in Tanzania, and college too. And I just think the way the world is developing, companies like Google no longer care if you went to college. They have their own educational course. Being able to run a small coffee shop with your AI would be a much more useful skill. Like the whole point of education, well, is to cultivate their tastes, but it's also, I want you to take care of yourself at the end of the day. And I'm not entirely sure that the education system we have now does that. It's had bad incentives from the federal government so that it kind of becomes a place to party. You said mature, but I would say kind of party. And with with the way the world is transforming so rapidly in this wave, I don't think a college degree is going to give you that differentiation or cultivation that's important anymore.
Well, I mean, I do think that one of the skills, well, two skills maybe they're the same skill, that it becomes very, very crucial in this future we're moving into is critical reasoning and attention. So, we were just talking about the example where you mentioned ChatGPT gave the lawyer a response that sounded right, but actually was not correct. And I think that's a danger I see, right? Like our system has checks and balances in place, but you might see some AI tools out there that don't have those checks and balances in place. And as a person, right, like you get these responses, they sound smart, they are long, right, they're lengthy maybe. And then being able to say, you know what, this is actually incorrect. I found mistakes in here. That becomes ever more a really important skill to have, to pay attention, have critical reasoning in there, and don't take it as granted. I had this great, I was at a talk the other day, and the example was brought up of like two different teachers. One says, I ban AI from the school, from the classroom. And the other one says, I want you to write an essay on this book. And here are 3 essays ChatGPT wrote, and I want yours to be better. So use those 3 essays as a starting point to create a better essay. And I thought that was a really good comparison, right, of the two options you have right now. Yeah, we need to use it as a tool to make ourselves better, but we still have to have critical reasoning skills. We still have to be able to pay attention, even more so than maybe before.
I think that's a good way to put it. My company here has a lot. It's 100 Tanzanian people who work there. English is their second language. And so when ChatGPT debuted a couple of years ago, I showed everybody how to use it to draft emails and immediately regretted it because, that ChatGPT lengthy 5-paragraph essay or whatever became more unreadable. And there is something kind of great about an English as a second language person getting to the point in just saying what they need to say. But yeah, if you can teach the next generation how to focus with like the infinite distractions that there are that are getting better and better, on Twitter, there is the most interesting thing in the world happening right now. And it could be more interesting than like talking to your friends. Like there's a reason all the adults are addicted to their phone. You'll have a big advantage if you can like separate yourself from that distraction and focus on creating something with these new tools.
No, so I come back to 19th century like Waldorf or something, like back in the woods, play, get the kids outside, away from devices, and then I mean, I don't think we have to necessarily come up with completely new education here. If we think back to some of the very traditional ways of education, like, hey, it might not be that bad, get some if we can get that critical reasoning skills, get kids to pay attention, that will be worth a lot in the future we're moving into.
I think you get the critical reasoning on the jungle gym at the playground where, you get some bullies and that kind of stuff. And that's where it develops. Lucas, that was so interesting. I want to say thank you so much. I love what you're building at the Gravity Foundation. And I'm going to be introducing you to some people who could benefit from this. So wonderful.
Thank you.
Wonderful.
This was incredible.
Is there a place? We'll put it in the show notes, but what's the best way for people to follow your work?
hello@gravity.foundation. And then,
Great.
LinkedIn, of course, follow us on LinkedIn as well. Both great ways. But we're happy to do demo. And we have a super exciting team here, very international. We have people in all time zones. So,
Great, man. Sounds like a lot to manage, but I'm glad you have Gravity there to help you manage it.
We have some some grounding.
Good.
Okay. Well, really nice to talk with you. I look forward to the segment.
Thanks.